Hi, everyone. My name is Dharma, who is a Buddhist monk and abbot of USN Institute in United States. Also, I'm serving as a trustee of Parliament of World Religions to celebrate this virtual event. I'm going to say a prayer in Pali, which is a language used by the Buddha 2,600 years ago. Ahong saha samabining mita sayudhantang kiri me kalang Udita kora sasena marang tanati dhamma vidhina citta vamunindo Tang tejasa bhavatu te Jaya Mangalani. I wish you all have a life of longevity, beauty, strength, and happiness. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.
The last 2 years have been challenging. The tragic murder of George Floyd was a stark revelation of the inequity of our societies. And here in London, a rich city, the people who have suffered most from the COVID virus have been the poor, who live in inadequate crowded housing. It's now difficult to say that America is the land of the free, while here in Britain we've been forced to review the sins of our colonial past. This challenges our religion. For many, religion has become a private matter. They may practice yoga or tai chi or meditate daily, seeking inner peace and harmony. And this is all fine. But these spiritual exercises are just a preliminary. The world religions all insist that they must propel us out of our comfort zone to heal the suffering of our world. Not one of you can be a believer, said the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, if he can sleep when he knows that someone is hungry. We usually see the Buddha sitting in the yogic position, deep in meditation, but that's not the whole story. The early Buddhist scriptures tell us that after the Buddha had achieved nirvana, enlightenment, he wanted to enjoy the blissful peace that he had acquired. Then it occurred to him that perhaps he should go out into the world and teach other people how to achieve this. But no, he decided, that would be too troubling and tiring for me. At that point, the god Brahma in the highest heaven cried aloud, "Then the world will be lost. The world will be utterly lost." And the god descended to earth and knelt before the enlightened man. And, the scriptures tell us, the Buddha looked at the world with the eye of a Buddha, saw the pain and suffering, and spent the last 40 years of his life tramping round the villages and towns of India, teaching people how to live productively with their suffering. Jesus made it clear that only those who reached out to a world in pain would enter the kingdom of God, and that he would tell them, "I was hungry, and you gave me to eat, thirsty, and you gave me to drink, sick, naked, and in prison, and you visited me." Perhaps we need another reformation. not one concerned with doctrinal matters like the last one, but a reformation that takes us back to the golden rule. Never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself, which was promulgated in every single one of the major world religions and declared to be the essence of faith. It was first enunciated by Confucius in the 6th century BCE. Do not impose on others, he said, what you yourself do not desire. And this, he added, must not just be done sporadically when we felt like it, but all day and every day. By constantly reaching out to others, to all others, whether we like them or not, putting ourselves to one side, we achieve the transcendence of egotism that brings enlightenment. I would like to read you a prayer in the early Buddhist scriptures that we should recite to ourselves every day and meditate upon it, while we're on the bus, walking in the park, or sitting in the garden among the things of nature. You'll see that it's not addressed to a god, but is a reminder of the importance of compassion, our main religious duty. It is attributed to the Buddha, and please note that it is concerned with all beings and not just human beings. Let all beings be happy, weak or strong, of high, middle or low estate, small or great, visible or invisible, near or far away, alive or still to be born. May they all be entirely happy. Let nobody lie to anybody or despise any single being anywhere. May nobody wish harm to any single creature out of anger or hatred. Let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child. May our loving thoughts fill the whole world, above, below, across, without limit, a boundless goodwill toward the whole world, unrestricted, free of hatred and enmity.
Namaste. Friends, I want to thank you for having me on this panel in the Parliament of World Religions 2021. I am speaking to you from New York, and it is in the context of this city and our world that I want to speak to you about religions today and the power of hope that we can get from them. There are two instances which I want to take up. First is this global pandemic. We are faced with a grave crisis all over the world. Perhaps every generation has to face their challenge, and this is perhaps the challenge of our generation. Here in New York, last year, the COVID pandemic was at its worst, the largest number of infections, the largest number of deaths anywhere in the world. Here in this city, every day we saw nearly 1,000 persons dying from COVID. I talked to doctors and healthcare workers and people who suffered from COVID and people who lost near and dear ones to COVID. One thing which emerged from it all was the power of spirituality. All of them, they said without exception, that without our spiritual life, and they come from different traditions, without our spiritual life, whatever tradition we come from, without that we couldn't have faced this tremendous challenge. Our spiritual lives, our spiritual practices, prayer, meditation, mindfulness, faith, these were sources of resilience, of strength, of continuing to be compassionate in the midst of a challenge which was grinding them down day by day, in the midst of losses which were like one healthcare worker, she said it was like being on a battlefield. It was tremendous. And yet in the midst of it, the source of hope, strength, resilience was her own spiritual life. And this is something that I heard from people across the board. At the beginning of the COVID crisis, somebody asked me, so in the midst of this crisis, are we supposed to talk about religion, spirituality, and metaphysics? And I said, this is the time to talk about spirituality. This is the time to draw upon the resources, not only of our own spiritual tradition, all the world's traditions, spiritual traditions, religious traditions are a resource that we can draw upon. It is the greatest resource that humanity has had since the beginning of civilization. The second thing which I want to bring up today is that religion, being the greatest force that humanity has ever seen, has a dark side. Here in New York again, last week, we had the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks. 20 years ago, a group of misguided men motivated by religious fanaticism committed the worst terrorist atrocity in human history. More than 3,000 people died here, not very far from where I'm sitting. I saw in the evening sky twin pillars of light where the Twin Towers used to stand, twin pillars of light going up into the evening sky, 6 kilometers into the evening sky, as if reaching out into infinity, representing the 3,000 souls who lost their lives on that tragic occasion. Swami Vivekananda, speaking in the, embodying the spirit of the World Parliament of Religions in 1893 on 9/11, he said that we not only believe in tolerance, but in universal acceptance of all religions as true. You see, in the very idea of tolerance lies the seed of violence. I tolerate you means that I think I am right, you are wrong, but I'm just sort of suffering you to live. But universal acceptance, which is the spirit of the World Parliament of Religions, it says that we accept the truth of all religions, that they all lead to spiritual freedom, that they all lead to the spiritual goal, and therefore they're all worthy of respect. If I love and respect my own religious tradition, then I must equally love and respect the religious traditions, the spiritual traditions of all of humanity. Swami Vivekananda embodied the very spirit of the Parliament of Religions. He said of his own master, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, that I knew a man whose very life was a Parliament of Religions. Now that is an example for all of us. Today, we have to draw upon the resources of the world religions to give us hope in the midst of this global pandemic, which is still going on, and strength, and to use the positive forces of religion to transform our lives, to make our lives a blessing for ourselves and a blessing for others. Our spiritual traditions, in the best spirit, they have harmony amongst each other, not conflict. They do not conflict with reason and science. Spiritual traditions are in full accord with the latest values of humanism. It is in this spirit that we must take our religions, our spirituality. We draw upon these ancient traditions to give us hope, to lead our lives in the midst of this darkness today, and to shine our light. Like those twin pillars of light reaching out to infinity, which New York skyline we saw just a few days ago, like that light, a spiritual light, to shine out through the ages. Thank you once again for having me. I pray to the Lord to bless all of us. Namaste.
Hi, I'm so glad to have the opportunity, the honor of speaking once again to the Parliament of World Religions. I can't imagine a time in history when a conclave such as this was more important. We are living in mortal crisis, this species of ours, in large part because we have desacralized the world. Our level of devotion, our level of reverence, our level of deep moral consideration for each other, for the earth, for animals, and for future generations has been so diminished, so replaced by very crass, even sociopathic economic considerations that have nothing to do with the human heart, that have nothing to do with human sustainability. Now, it could be argued that when religion, when spirituality, when concerns of the heart and of the spirit are central in the life of a civilization, that such problems like that would not necessarily occur. Those problems have occurred, however, and in large part because there has been a shrinking of the religious and spiritual life of so many of the population of the human race. These problems are understood now. I do believe there is a critical mass of people who are awakening to the level of crisis and the urgency by which the people of the world must rise up now and change direction. And much of the direction needs to be articulated by people who understand the deeper spiritual laws that have to do not only with what has happened, what has gone wrong, namely that we have so separated ourselves from moral considerations, from religious considerations, from spiritual considerations, but also it is within the traditions of the great spiritual and religious texts that we understand how humanity can atone for our errors, make amends for our errors, and begin again. That's where I feel we are right now. People understanding the shame, people feeling the horror of understanding what we have done to this earth, what we have done to each other, and the diminished possibilities for the future that result. Now it's time for us to atone for our mistakes and in our own ways to make amends. And that includes the religions. That includes the great institutions of religion as well as the institutions of government and business and everything else. Where have we failed? Where have we not stood by what we know to be true? And in the case of religion and spirituality, where have we allowed ourselves to disconnect from the actual suffering in our midst? Sometimes even to use spiritual principle as a cover for ignoring the suffering of other sentient beings. In fact, there is no religious or spiritual tradition that gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. That's what we must do now. We must take a stand. This business about love one another, he wasn't kidding. This idea that we are to walk humbly with God, he wasn't kidding. This idea that we should show compassion for one another, he wasn't kidding. Whether it's Buddha or whether it's Moses, whether it's Jesus, whether it is the voice for God, whether it is Muhammad, whether it is any other great religious or spiritual teacher, let us look to the lessons of peace. Let us look to the directives of love and do more than talk about them now. Let's actually put them into practice in ways that they need to be in order for the human race to forge for itself a survivable and thrivable future. I believe that religious ceremony, religious ritual, congregational worship is a kind of, it's like a vitamin that is released as time goes on, a time-released capsule. People come to us for practice, people come to us for worship, and then they leave and something has been activated within the heart. The new priesthood can be a therapist. The new priesthood can be an artist. The new priesthood can be a teacher. The new priesthood can be a business person. The new priesthood can be anyone who stands forth in the civilization at this time and says about whatever we are doing, let us do this for love. Let us create art for love. Let us create business for love. Let us do science for love. Let us do healing for love. That is the message that we must give to the congregant. That is the message we must give to the client. That is the message we must give to those we serve. In A Course in Miracles, it talks about God's plan for the teachers of God. This is, according to the Course, God's plan for the healing of the world. When Jesus told the disciples to go out into the countryside and teach the gospel, they said, according to the Gospel of Thomas, what will we say? And he said, I'll tell you when you get there, because the gospel is love. He wasn't saying, go hit other people over the head with our book. He was saying, go love, and my spirit will tell you how to do it, what to say, how to be, what to do. The Course in Miracles says the teachers of God come from all religions and from no religions. They are those who have heard the call. And it says the call is going out. And all units of time and space at this time, it is, we are feeling it. People of the world are feeling it. And I believe that the great religions, the great spiritual traditions, we can look at ourselves in the mirror now. And we can ask, how can we serve? How can we be part of the renewal? How can we be part of the repair? How can we be part of the regeneration? Not part of the crucifixion, but part of the resurrection. Not part of the slavery in Egypt, but rather part of the deliverance to the promised land. Because that is the ultimate message of all spiritual and religious truth. That, as it is said in the Course in Miracles, God's will has never not been done. You know, those 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection, that's the symbolic time it takes between the time when fear has held love hostage and the time when love has been liberated to be itself. Same with those 40 years between the slavery and the deliverance of the promised land. Where does free will come in? It is completely up to us how long those 3 days takes. It's completely up to us how long we're wandering in the desert. We are now in what my friend Sandy used to call tomb time. The crucifixion is happening. The violation of love is happening. The horror, the violence, the wars, the poverty, it's all happening. The breakdown of human civilization as we have known it is happening. We must acknowledge that. We must live in positive denial, not negative denial. Negative denial is we look away. Positive denial is we look at it in the eyes, and we deny its power over us because we know the story. That is the point of being a religious or spiritual person. Oh, we know how this story ends. But just as we need God's help, God needs our help. He needs our hands. He needs our feet. He needs us to take action. He needs us to think as He would have us think, to love as He would have us love, to forgive as He would have us forgive, and to allow the compassion, the spirit with which He fills us, to extend through us in whatever way He directs. We must be the immune cells. We must be the white blood cells that now go out into the body politic. What will we do? He'll tell us when we get there. If we feel like making a piece of art, it will be that we are to make a piece of art for the sake of love. If it's to build a business, it will be to build a business for the sake of love. If it is to farm land, it's to farm land for the sake of love, to repair the earth, to take care of children, to take care of each other, to forge a new politics, to forge a new everything. That's the resurrection. That's God's answer. That's the miracle that will follow all of the darkness and all of the pain and all of the violence. And that is why we say hallelujah. And that is why we say praise God. And that is why we say, God, use me. May God use all of us. And may our attendance at this conclave of the Parliament of World Religions be a time-release capsule within all of us, after which we leave ever renewed and ready to go for the sake of love. God bless you. Thank you.
各位尊敬的宗教领袖，各位跨宗教的朋友们，大家好，大家平安。慈悲最基本的就是引领众生脱离苦难，而现在与未来最迫切在眉睫是气候变迁与生态浩劫。在各个信仰中，世界万物都是同根同源，只要静下心来，就可以感受到彼此之间的连结，灵性与生态既为一体共生，不可区分。曾有一位霍比族老酋长说过，大自然的变化都是反映人类的生态所造成的伤害。去进行转换与净化，就如同洗涤污垢与缝合伤口一般。灵性无所不在，只要没有回归灵性，你就不知道珍惜生态。唯有回归灵性，才能真正解决生态与人类永续的问题。希望依循这样的精神，展开化解地球的危机。具体行动就是灵性觉醒、跨界合作。我提出3项合作目标。首先，所有宗教应该团结合作，让教众都能灵性觉醒，呼吁生态环境的共识，从各自信仰传统出发，推动正确的生态观念，认知到大自然与人是多元共生、相依共存的伙伴关系，同时也由内在忏悔人类对地球所造成的种种破坏，净化心中对立、仇恨、掠夺的因子。同时，我们也想邀约大家一同响应素食爱地球全球畜牧业排放的全球总温室气体的20%，仅次于能源污染。希望我们宗教界也来亲身示范，多响应吃素爱地球的实际行动，从每天的饮食出发，以实际的行动为地球的健康尽一份心力。其次，我们要找到问题根源，解决问题。科学家已提供各种方法，告诉所有人怎么保护地球，复原地球的固有的永续动力。最重要是要让生态浩劫的一个造作者觉醒，自身终将是地球灾难的受害者，进而意识到生存危机，并迅速改变，积极出发，正确行动。再来，我们宗教界要共同制止战争，废除核武。核武战争是地球毁灭不可逆的关键点，而核弹一引爆，此时没有胜负，只有共同毁灭。所以，为了人类的永续与所有生态共存的伙伴的安全，我们必须用宗教最大的力量来一同制止核武的战争， 甚至何当施暴等不智的行为，这是我们宗教的使命。地球是一个有机结构体，然人类无止境的开发，有如抽干了地球母亲的血和精气神，接踵而来的只会是地球为了自救的反扑。万物皆为灵性平等的显现在生态环境的系统中，人类勿妄自尊大，也莫唯我独尊。在万物的互济共生中，串联起爱与灵性的一个生命网络，能够觉醒灵性及生态，就是慈悲的展现，带来和平与永续的希望。非常的感谢大家的聆听，也感恩大会给我们的平台，宗教的连结共识，创造世界的平安和谐。祝福大会圆满成功，谢谢，谢谢。
A short 1800-year-old prayer. Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana would pray a short prayer upon entering and leaving the Beit Midrash, the study hall. The rabbi said to him, "What is the nature of this prayer?" He said to them, "When I enter, I pray that no mishap should occur because of me, and when I depart, I give thanks for my lot." Our virtual parliament is our modern-day equivalent of a study hall. We gather here, our presenters gather here, with the opportunity to teach and learn. To do so is an awesome responsibility. No mishap should occur because of our concerns and passions for the important subjects we confront together. This is our opportunity to learn, to be challenged, to be engaged, to be inspired, to agree, to disagree, all in an atmosphere that we share the same concern for a better world. We draw upon the wisdom of the masters of our sacred traditions and the insights we can all bring to those traditions. Let us celebrate this magnificent opportunity to gain awareness and knowledge of what pains the world and the accomplishments we have made to better this world for so many. May our traditions offer us helpful critique and hope for the possibility of transformation. And when we leave this gathering, may we express gratitude for the good fortune to have been together.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, the celebration of this 2021 Parliament of the World Religions takes place among a series of global and multidimensional crises that are threatening international peace and stability, sustainable development, human rights, and the rights of future generations. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused more than 4.5 million deaths and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. The crisis has led to a setback in the fight against poverty, with estimates of the World Bank that indicate that the number of people in extreme poverty rose to 115 million in 2020, marking the first increase in global poverty in more than 20 years. Poverty affects women disproportionately. Even before the pandemic, women are more likely than men to live in extreme poverty, especially indigenous women and women with disabilities. With the impact of the health and economic crisis, new projections indicate that by the end of this year, 47 million additional women and girls will be pushed into extreme poverty. And the pandemic coincided with an intensification of the climate crisis as well. The signs that we are approaching a point of no return in climate change and moving towards an ecological and civilizational catastrophe are unequivocal. The scientific evidence that anthropogenic greenhouse gases are provoking irreparable damage was confirmed in August 9th by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. In its sixth report, the panel warns that we are dangerously closing to breach the Paris Agreement goal in limiting average global temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius, above, of course, pre-industrial levels. The panel found that in 2019, atmospheric CO2 concentrations were higher than at any time in at least 2 million years. The changes in global temperatures are already affecting every inhabited region across the globe in the form of heat waves, droughts, wildfires, tropical cyclones, heavy precipitation, rising sea levels, and floods. The impact of extreme weather events is resulting in 60,000 deaths and pushing 26 million people into poverty every year. With these trends, by 2050, the impacts of climate change will force more than 140 million people to migrate in order to avoid its worst effects, which in turn will provoke more poverty and exclusion, increase social tensions and conflict. In addition to that, we're also witnessing with great concern the endurance of what we call a clash of civilizations mentality in world politics. This discourse that divides the world in several schisms, such as West and East, North and South, Christian and Muslim, tends to provoke and justify armed conflicts and wars. Having its most critical expression, let's remember the terrorist attacks on 9/11. 2001 was a critical year, and the war on terror that followed is also an issue of concern. An irrational modern crusade that has caused that global stigmatization of the Muslim faith, unspeakable suffering worldwide, millions of civilian deaths, and the destruction of entire countries. And this is only one example. This pervasive political discourse of intolerance, of hate speech that has gradually plagued the world after the end of the Cold War is providing a fertile ground for the emergence of xenophobic, racist, religious fundamentalist behavior. The clash of civilizations mentality has been calling into question for more than 20 years the prospect of international peace, international cooperation, multilateralism, and the global progress in the promotion and respect of fundamental rights. The Manichaean divide between nations and cultures is truly hampering global solidarity and cooperation to address current global challenges, including concerted action to respond to the current COVID pandemic, to reverse inequalities, and to eradicate poverty and violence, to mitigate climate change, and to stop environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. So, countering this dangerous trend is a moral imperative and a civilizational necessity. And we find ourselves in a critical moment, a moment of change and transformation in which we have the golden opportunity to rebuild our societies and our economies, our political systems, and our multilateral architecture. The historical turning point that we are experiencing today offers us the opportunity to collectively craft what I call a new social contract that allows us to tackle the multidimensional crises and build back better our world. This new global social and ecological pact has to be based on principles of solidarity, tolerance, cooperation, co-responsibility, and community. It has to be grounded in notions of human and planetary security, that is, to an understanding and practice of the politics of human security that sets the individual development and well-being of all human beings and the protection and conservation of nature as its highest priorities. This social contract has also to include a feminist perspective, both from the promotion of gender equality and women's rights, as well as for a deep transformation in our interactions away from strength, competition, greed, aggression, and domination that produce and reproduce the clash of civilizations mentality. And finally, a new social contract needs to foster an intercultural, intergenerational, and interreligious dialogue through which we can value our differences, learn from each other, and find innovative and creative solutions for our common challenges. It is on this basis that I salute and congratulate the realization of the 2021 Parliament of the World Religions and this plenary of hope. I am convinced that horizontal, inclusive, interfaith dialogue, such as the one we are having today, contributes to the promotion of tolerance, understanding, and fraternity among nations and cultures, and to the construction of more peaceful and sustainable societies. Let us use this forum to renew our vows for peace and share with the world a message of hope in these troubled times. Let us remember the wise words of the South African Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who said, and I quote him, "Hope is being able to see that there is light despite of all the darkness." End of quote. Let us then ignite more beacons of hope and illuminate the path towards a better world. I thank you for your attention.
My name is Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger. My heart has always been open to the world, but I did not know how narrow the opening was until interfaith encounters while I was serving as a rabbi in Dallas, Texas, began to open it up ever wider. Through ongoing interfaith meetings and study, and especially through deep friendship with clergy of other faiths, I found myself enriched and expanded. It was as if I was given access to more of my soul and more of my heart. Appreciation and empathy for Islam and especially for Christianity were born within me. After a few years in Dallas, I returned home to Israel. What I had undergone in Dallas brought me to seek out Palestinians, people who until then had been completely invisible for me, part of the scenery or the background noise, but certainly not part of the central drama of life in the Holy Land. People who were the other, the enemy. We met. We told stories of who we are, and we listened to stories of who they are. It was so hard to listen. It was challenging. It was unsettling. It was disturbing. Many times it was as if I was hit in the gut. It was so hard to listen because each side, so it turns out, each side's experience and perspective completely contradicts and erases the other side's experience and perspective. We came to see how both sides completely deny the other side's identity and reality. My meetings with local Palestinians transformed me. I was brought to confront and to reconstruct the most basic fundamentals of my own self-understanding and of my construction of reality. And I, together with others on both sides, began to internalize the need, the possibility, and the blessing of finding room for two truths in one heart and two peoples in one land. It turns out that I'd been sick with the hubris of exclusivity, infected with the conviction that my religious and national truth are the only truth, that my connection to land is the only legitimate connection. I began a process of healing. I'd been blind, and I began a process of opening my eyes. My heart had been callous, hardened, and I began a process of softening. We created Roots, the Israeli-Palestinian grassroots initiative for understanding, nonviolence, and transformation. Roots, that shoashim in Hebrew and judor in Arabic, brings together Israelis and Palestinians to meet on an equal footing, to really begin to get to know each other in the deepest sense, to really learn about the other, to heal, and to join forces to work for a better, more just reality. In Roots, we have discovered that at the core of this conflict are two mutually exclusive identities. Political differences around land, sovereignty, national resources, security are only symptoms of the conflict. We need political negotiations and political solutions, but we also need to grapple with the other side's identity and to come to terms with it. There will not be peace until each side fully recognizes and embraces the other side's identity. And this, of course, entails identifying and reinterpreting those elements of our own identity, religious and national, that effectively prevent us from legitimizing the other side's identity. There will also not be peace until each side recognizes the other side's pain and loss. We must be able to experience their pain and loss almost as we experience our own. We must own up to what we have done to cause their pain. Yes, we on both sides are also at fault. We must engage in personal and national introspection and repentance. Furthermore, there will not be peace until each side recognizes the other side's fears as well as its own role in exacerbating them. We must be able to put ourselves in the shoes of the other and to feel their fear. We must ask ourselves on both sides, why are they afraid of us? What have we done? And what did we say? And what do we think that fuels their fear? And we must dig even deeper and ask ourselves why we do and say and think those things that cause their fear, and how can we recalibrate and change course. We must take responsibility to do what it takes to put to rest the other side's fear of us. Lastly, we have discovered the transformative effects of joint actions. We must join forces to combat discrimination, inequity, revenge, and violence. We must show up for the other side, defend the other side, work for justice for the other side. We have become convinced that there will not be peace until both sides receive what they need, what they want, and what they deserve. The good of my side requires that I work for the good of the other side. To be pro-Israel requires one to be pro-Palestine, and to be pro-Palestine requires one to be pro-Israel. To be pro-Palestine at the same time pro-Israel may be the only effective way to be pro-peace, pro-justice, and pro-security. I, Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, am pro-Israel, and I'm also pro-Palestine. I hope that you as well will be pro-Palestine and pro-Israel. Thank you.
In 1993, at the Royal Free Hospital in London, I had a near-death experience. The doctors couldn't stem my bleeding and had prepared my family for my death. The pain was indescribable. It was at this point I experienced being held upright in a chariot by a golden being who said he was Lord Krishna. He explained that I could not die, as I still had not gone into battle. When I regained consciousness, the nurse said that no one could have saved me, only God. Interestingly, a psychiatrist friend, a pioneer in using meditation for healing, had at the same time seen me riding in a golden chariot with a glorious being. He contacted my family to find out how I was. I was not well for years and waited to find out what battle I was supposed to fight. I had already experienced many battles in my life as a human rights campaigner, fighting for women's equality, for the homeless, for those enslaved, and against every form of apartheid. What more did God want me to do? It took me 3 years to find out. The new battle was to start an interfaith centre in London. It was fierce. It even involved taking the British government to court. But the higher beings had already made another plan. The centre was not to be in London, but in Britain's beautiful Royal Forest of Dean, in the heart of nature. Today it is a thriving interfaith, intercultural hub called the Asher Centre, a place of hope, beauty and innovation. Few people know about my Zoroastrian religion, which underpins my life and is considered the oldest monotheism in the world. Our prophet Zarathustra has in so many ways set the world's moral compass, from our understanding of the created God, the cosmic battle of good against evil, the concept of heaven and hell, the hierarchy of angels, the coming of the Messiah, the resurrection, and finally the day of judgment, when we will be judged for our thoughts, words and deeds. Although such an ancient religion, it is modern in its emphasis on protecting the animal world, not polluting the elements and caring for our shared environment. I call it the first green religion. Many people spontaneously call the Asher Centre paradise. The word paradise comes from Persian and means an enclosed garden with a flowing stream, orchards and beautiful flowers, usually roses. Beauty is important because it reminds us of our true state. To quote the Iranian poet Iqbal, "When you recognize what is beautiful in the world, you stop being a slave." The Asher Centre has an outstanding track record in delivering transformative education in the fields of interfaith understanding, sustainable development and the performing arts. It has also been home to the training of interfaith ministers and to yoga, meditation and other well-being groups. Over the years, young people from 180 countries have attended sponsored residential training courses. Alongside other themes, they explore the wisdom of different faiths. An example of thousands of young people who have benefited from their time at Asher is Gianni, a young gentleman from Verona looking for his life's purpose. At Asher, he was encouraged to engage his will in service to others and decided to take a degree in peace studies. Gianni has gone on to oversee the refugee program in Venice and has recently taken the challenge of working with trafficked women. We all talk about involving the young in creating a more hopeful, sustainable and compassionate future. At Asher, we know from years at working with young people that we must enable them to do so on their own terms. To this end, Asher has piloted a 10-day gathering of young Zoroastrian leaders to look at the challenges facing their global community. With the blessing of their elders, they found their own voice as a generation and created a dynamic manifesto for change. They have gone on to become vibrant leaders, connected to each other while working for the good of the wider community. My commitment to the World Parliament of Religions is to offer the Asher Centre for other such gatherings of young leaders across all faiths. Living, working and breaking bread together, they will experience the beauty and the truth of each other's faiths, as well as their own. United, they will be empowered to respond to their own callings. Throughout my life, I have been inspired by the most extraordinary people, working for the higher good, but not sufficiently connected to each other. I've also seen the dark forces at work. They are very adept at working together. Today, they are running amok with their arrogance, greed, cruelty and corruption. They mock those that try to do good. Surely it is time to stand up to them. As a Zoroastrian, I know that our God, Ahura Mazda, has gifted us free will, but needs us as co-warriors in the fight against evil. As an interfaith warrior, I know that we also need divine grace to finally defeat the forces of darkness, and together herald in the light.
Divine Creator, we ask your blessing upon our virtual assembly. May our shared experience instill in all of us a greater sense of compassion, courage, and hope. May our time together in a spirit of human fraternity deepen our commitment to protect the creation with which you have gifted us. Through our shared experience of your continuing presence, may we come to recognize the divine strength you willingly share with us as your co-creators. Stand with us as we work for justice and complete peace. Amen.
This is the message from the ancient Samaritan community, from the Holy Land. I hope that the peace will be all over the world by this praying. This prayer by the ancient language in the world, the Samaritan language. ناطتي صالم بارف وساقب تماوين مارد يفشم شما اقرأ وابو قاد الليل وينو الثرطا من فائلو كيك الديريكو مشفط الآمونا وين قول صادق يا شرقو بارك إلو وينو لولام وبارك شيمو لولام إلى رب لتيكا باتلاميني كليرمو إلى رما نورتا عبد طبيعي لابات اللام دتيرمان تصيبا طالي سمعك ربا ناثوا لتيلا الله بتيلا وإلا دلا كلا وبدك وبدك ما في سومي عبارة أديري تضايق نترف بيلك لترثني كبطك ولامي أمي كبطك ولابي لبري منك لالم دتيرمان تصيبا طالي سمك ربا ناثوا لتيالا الله عزي وذميراتي ويايلي ليسوع ذيلي ونابيو إلوي أبي ورومي منيو سما جبري بمالما سما سمولولم دتيرمان دتيرمان بريكك شيما ويشمارك يا إرشيما فانو إليك ويا إنك إشا شيما فانو إليك ويا شملك شالوم.
I'm Dr. Jean Houston, and such an honor to help open this magnificent gathering of spiritual and religious leaders and seekers from all around the world. Well, friends, this is a high time, a holy time, indeed a sacred time, a time in which the reset button of history may be pressed. And be not afraid. You were made for these times. We come together at a time of profound challenge and extraordinary change. We are facing an unprecedented moment in human and planetary history, a time of whole system transformation in which people and purpose are being asked to cross the great divide of otherness and recognize the soul-driven gifts that each of us embodies. Our lives are now regularly containing many times the amount of sheer experience of our ancestors of earlier centuries. As a result, we are heirs to an extraordinary speeding up of the evolutionary process. We move to new professions, lifestyles, religions, seemingly at will. Nothing, it seems, is impossible for us. Nature, through us, seems to be entering a new epoch, not so much biological evolution, but conscious evolution. We have become conscious of our capacities to direct the next phase, not only of our personal lives, but of the world's destiny as well. At no time in history, in the very course of history, have the stakes been so high for self, society, and the earth herself. The sheer scope of breakdown and breakthrough, beauty and ugliness, the unexpected as the expected, the upside-down, topsy-turvy nature of things that previously had been ordinary and unchanging, all these elements bring us into the planet-wide life of a story that is unique and previously unknown, always surprising, and therefore what I call mythic. And this is happening to all of us simultaneously, all around the world, regardless of culture or context, economics or ecology, science or spirit. It is as if we have landed on the unknown other side of the moon of ourselves, and we have little or no training or mentoring with which to meet the immensities of the challenge. And yet, tap into the inner world of virtually anyone, anywhere, and you find the great mythic themes roiling within them. Beneath the surface of consciousness, not only are myth and an emerging new narrative alive, but so is the beginning of a new sacred history of which we are its partners and its parents. But so, I believe, is the emerging story which is strewn with the seeds of personal and cultural transformation. And no old formulas or stopgap solutions will serve. Oh, friends, we find ourselves at present in the midst of the most massive shift of perspective humankind has ever known. Clearly, we are living in a time in which our very nature is in transition. The scope of change is calling forth patterns and potentials in the human brain, mind, spiritual system that, as far as we know, were never needed before. Knowings that were relegated to the unconscious are becoming conscious. Experiences that belong to extraordinary reality are becoming ordinary. Now, speaking as one who has worked in, well, close to 100 countries, I find that with the intersection of so many ways of being from all over the planet, the maps of the psyche and of human possibilities are undergoing awesome change. Awesome change. During this time, we need to heed the call of this Parliament and open our hearts to the world and move our compassion into action. At the United Palace of Spiritual Arts in New York City, where I serve as board chair, we speak of spiritual artistry. And as we all know, the spiritual and religious traditions of the world have shared their insights and wisdom through art. Yes, I mean, art is one of the humanity's most enduring spiritual languages. I mean, understanding this, spiritual artists open their hearts and souls to all the world's arts, cultures, and spiritual wisdom. Every faith and spiritual tradition, every culture and people have unique wisdom and insight to share with the world. And through this global communion, spiritual artists seek to find their own unique voice in this world and time, a voice they put into compassionate service to others and all of creation. So, friends, I encourage you to use this historic gathering to open your heart to the unknown, the unfamiliar, the foreign, the alien, the stranger, and allow your heart to grow, your soul to deepen, your imagination to soar. I encourage you to become a spiritual artist. Yesterday, having too much experience of the weight of the world, I decided to take a long car ride up in the hills where I could look down at the valleys and the plains, the lakes, rivers. But I saw below me on the plains a magnificent building. I went to visit, and this building and its surroundings was actually the Tashi Choling Tibetan temple, filled with the most exquisite statues, Buddhas, arts, the genius of the spiritual artistry of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. The air was filled with the prayers of those who had sought the peace and tranquility of this magnificent temple to lift their souls, their minds, and yes, their possibilities. And in those moments that I had the great consolation of being there, I could feel my own spirits rising, my own sense of being, of purpose, of becoming clearer, and my own love of the earth and of all its creatures and beings becoming stronger. I was in this rare place of spiritual artistry. And so, dear friends, I encourage you, I ask you to allow the spiritual artist who lives within you to grow, to thrive, and to bring a new world into time. Thank you.
My fellow brothers and sisters, representing world faith who have assembled here virtually. I solemnly greet Jai Jinendra to all the members and dignitaries of the Parliament of World Religion who are present here. I represent Jainism, ancient India's religious tradition. I venture to speak today on the theme of opening our heart to the world, compassion in action, through the 8th Parliament of World Religion virtual platform. First of all, I would like to tell you that the essence of Jainism is ahimsa, non-violence. All Jain beliefs, practice, rituals and traditions emanate from this. Jain practice ahimsa not only towards human beings but also towards all living beings. Ancient Jain texts explain that violence is not defined by actual harm. For this may be an unintentional, it is the intention to harm. The absence of compassion that makes action violent. Without violent thought, there could be no violent action. There is 6 steps to adapt non-violence in one's life. First, 3 steps are avoid harm by our action, our speech and our thoughts, which remain us not to harm anyone, become physically injuring someone is most painful. There we say as a means to hurt, other can also hurt someone in death, and we should eliminate our thoughts of harming others. Next 3 steps are loving through our action, our speech and our thoughts, which mean to develop thoughts of compassion and sacrifice for others, to talk in a loving manner like complimenting and praising others, to do act of kindness and selflessness. Further, I would say that every particle of our creation is interconnected, also depend on each other. In such a situation, the main slogan of Jainism, Parasparo Graho Jivanam, become very relevant, according to which we should always be ready for each other cooperation in life. There is great importance of salvation, nirvana, liberation in Jainism. Lord Mahavira, 24th Tirthankar, has considered compassion and mercy is the path of liberation. He says, Asambhivagi nahotasya mokho, means who does not have the consciousness of contribute, he is not entitled to salvation. Thus, if your brother, if your neighbor is hungry and you eat enough, then according to Jainism, the doors of salvation are closed for you. Compassion, kindness, generosity, empathy and fellow feelings are the qualities that have the potential of converting all the problem of mankind into stepping stone to heaven. These are the catalysts has been searching for ages for solve his never-ending riddles of existence. All the sorrow, all the war, all the poverty, all the unemployment, all the gap between rich and poor, all the disease exist because of lack of compassion in human hearts. Lincoln felt compassion for the discriminate colored people and abolished slavery. Louis Peter felt compassion for the suffering mankind and dedicated his life to finding cure for rabies. Mother Teresa felt in for the poor and the sick and dedicated her life in elevating their tents. Similarly, all the great men and women whom we adore as our role model has been compassionate person. Mahatma Gandhi was inspired by compassion in his fellow countrymen to come out of the shackles of injustice. Thus said, things is not everyone practice compassion. It requires real strength of character to practice compassion in all our deeds. However, one thing is crystal clear. If the mankind is to rise higher to a higher level of gods, it must practice compassion in their thoughts, words and deeds. At present, due to corona pandemic, people all over the world have lost their teeth and kin untimely. Many younger children have become orphaned. A large number of people have lost their jobs, due to which they have become unemployed. People need to stand by each other to such difficult time and all situations. In such a difficult situation, a single person cannot do anything. By following the path of Parasparo Jivanam of Jain philosophy and by supporting each other, one can everyone the problem. India is a faith-oriented country. Here every day, millions of people visit religious places like temple, mosque, churches, gurdwara, etc. In such a situation, according to the call of the Parliament of World Religions, all religious leaders may inspire their followers with compassion for service, cooperation, then the work which government cannot done by spending lakhs of dollars can be done easily in India, a country of sages and faith. I think that by taking this idea of message, we can make the vision of the 8th Parliament of the world religion, opening our heart to the world, compassion in action, come true. Thank you. Jai Jinendra. Om Araham.
Dear God, thank you for creating this beautiful world, for creating us, and for putting us all in it. Please bless and heal and protect all sentient beings everywhere on earth and in the universe. Please bless and heal and protect our species. May we grow ever closer to you, dear God, and come as close as we can on this earth, to ending war and hate and violence, to ending intolerance, to ending poverty, and greatly to decrease inequality. Please bless and heal and protect this beautiful earth, which you have provided to us and which we have so despoiled. With a fierce sense of urgency, and with whatever miracles and actions are needed by us humans, please help us end and reverse global warming and this kind of climate change, and then reverse environmental destruction and species extinction, and cause us quickly to live in symbiosis with the earth. Please take the COVID-19 pandemic away from the world. May we learn its lessons so that we can respond to a future pandemic much better than we have to this one. Thank you, dear God, for all of the blessings you have given us. Amen.
When events around me seem overwhelming, when worry and doubt darken the landscape of my mind, I call forth faith. Faith expands my awareness to recognize the presence of spirit in every person, place, and circumstance. It reminds me to trust in my abilities and believe in myself, knowing I am ever supported by the divine.